Before you write your essay, while you are still identifying these main features, look at the language of the categories rather than the math. You can figure out the trends quickly, as I said previously, by looking at the shapes of the lines. If we draw a line here along the data for croissants, we can see the overall trend is going up. Sales for this category increased. If we have a look at biscuits, on the other hand, and just draw a line following the data for biscuits, we find the line goes down. So we know that over the period, biscuit sales declined or fell. Then if we looked at baked bread, we can see that even though baked bread sales went up and down throughout the period, overall they rose, but not very much. So we could say that even though sales of baked bread fluctuated over the period, they went up and down, overall, by the end of the period, they only rose marginally. They only rose a small amount. So make sure you also pay attention to the information on the X and Y axes, so you understand what they're describing. In this case, we can see that on the X-axis, we have the amount of money which each of these categories earned in these different months. And on the Y-axis, obviously, we have the passage of time, telling us when these sales took place. Pay attention to these units of measurement, like months and dollars, because you will need to refer to those explicitly in your essay. So, key points here. When you are previewing the graph and the question prompt before you start writing, firstly, look at the categories, the words, not the values, not the math, not the numbers. Secondly, understand what the X and Y axis are describing. And thirdly, make a good note of any units of measurement used. You will need to refer to those in your essay, whether the units of measurement are dollars, months, weight, height, or something else. After you've done that, start to examine the time frame. As we've seen, this is indicated on the X-axis at the bottom. And as I said before, you will need to look at the entire time frame in order to understand the general trends. We already saw, for example, how that the trend for croissants was up. And we looked at how the trend for biscuits was down. We saw how the trend for baked bread was marginally higher at the end. Then there was one we hadn't discussed, which, as you'll see, is almost exactly the same from the start to the finish. And we could say that this one was as a trend which is static or plateaued, meaning it stayed almost exactly the same. Now, we'll have to describe these trends in different ways, but what we really need to do is identify the primary trends. The two primary trends here, the most obvious trends, are croissant sales going up a lot and biscuit sales going down a lot. A minor trend is baked bread sales going up a little by the end of the period, and another minor trend is the cupcake sales staying almost exactly the same. Once we've identified these trends, these will be useful to use in the topic sentences in our body paragraphs. In order to make comparisons and contrasts, just look at similarities or differences between the shapes of the line. In this case, we have biscuit sales and croissants both showing very different trends. So it would be a good idea to compare and contrast these, since they are the most obvious trends and because they interact. We can see, for example, that at this particular date in this month, the sales of croissants gradually exceed or go past the sales of biscuits. Then we could compare and contrast the minor trends, one of them which rose only slightly, and the other which stayed almost the same. So this stage of your essay writing is a good time to start looking at comparisons and contrasts.